Thanks for coming along. It's super exciting to be here for the launch of our book, which is an academic's guide to social media. So it's super nice to actually see this in the flesh. I got sent a couple of copies a few weeks ago, and when it comes to working with the co-authors, it was a really exciting journey, putting together ideas for the sort of things that we could share in this book. I did like a podcast interview a couple of weeks ago, and one of the interviewer asked, "How did you actually get involved in social media in the first place?" And I remember back, this was I think it was about 12, 13 years ago, just before I started my PhD. I was a research assistant, and I discovered Twitter, and I thought, this is such a fantastic way of actually figuring out what other people are doing, what other academics are doing, and not many people had actually discovered it at the time. And I used to log on thinking, this is fantastic. I can actually understand and see what other people, what things are interesting other people, the papers that people are following, the things that people are reading. And this was back, especially when I was a junior academic, and I saw all these authors and these scientists, and I'm like, these people are doing such fantastic work. And all of a sudden, social media, and at the time particular Twitter, began to humanize what they were doing, and it was able to bring fantastic opportunities for actually learning new skills and for building collaborations. So for me, the reason that I've written this book and the reason that I talk a lot about this is because of the sort of fantastic opportunities that social media can give, particularly for junior academics and particularly for academics who are part of underrepresented groups. Especially, and that also includes people that aren't at fancy institutions, at fancy universities, or people that aren't already part of very well-known labs. The unfortunate reality is that academia is not a meritocracy, in that the best work doesn't necessarily rise to the top. So we have a situation now, historically, where there are very few gatekeepers which actually decided whether your work would get out there, whether your work would get selected to be published in particular journals, or whether you would actually be asked or invited to speak at conferences. So we had quite a unique situation for a number of years. Well, this is how academia has been going for a very, very long time, in that we have these gatekeepers who are deciding whether your work gets out there and whether your work gets published. So there was a situation, and not to mention that as well, is when actually speaking to the media and the traditional forms of media are another way in which we can share our work, whether it's through TV, whether it's through the radio, or whether it's through newspapers. But again, you have a small set of people deciding whether your work gets out there. A couple of weeks ago, or earlier this year, I was invited to do a piece in a newspaper, and it was all very exciting, and I sent in the piece, but in the last moment, the editor was like, "Oh, sorry, we're going to have to bump your piece to a couple of months later because something that was more time sensitive came." And I understand that there's only so much space within a newspaper, but that's what happens when it comes to these centralized things such as newspapers, such as radio, such as TV. You have very little control about when your work gets shared. So the benefits of when it comes to the old system, we have this way where there was only 3 ways for you to actually get your work known. You either had to already be famous, you had to have a famous mentor, or you have to repeatedly win the peer review lottery. And that's how it's been for a very, very long time. Those are the only ways for you to get your work known. So when it comes to social media, this provides fantastic opportunities for you to actually get your work known, because by doing this, you can get around these gatekeepers. You don't have to rely on a small editorial team to decide this work is important. You don't have to wait for an editor to say, okay, now you can actually publish your work. Social media provides a whole bunch of benefits for you to be able to share your work. So it's because of this that I started going, okay, sharing these ideas with other academics, and it's been fantastic to be able to share these things and to do talks and to do workshops. And what's now ended up in this book, which I've co-authored with a few other colleagues as well. So that's the journey which has led us to this book, because the 4 of us have seen the benefits that social media can provide. And one of the biggest benefits for this book is, one of the most common questions that we get is, what do I post? What sort of stuff do I post? And within this book, we actually have included 365 days worth of potential prompts of things that you can actually talk about and things you can post about. This is actually the thing which almost took us the longest to write. We got to like 50 posts and we're like, okay, there's a lot of extra stuff to do, but it's in there. So, and we're very glad that we don't speak about a specific network. A lot within academia, we focus on Twitter or we focus on Facebook. So for this particular book, we talk about most of the major media platforms. What's interesting was by the time we wrote it, Mastodon had actually existed, but it wasn't very popular. But then by the time it was published, now Mastodon has actually become quite popular. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that and a bit of the rise of Mastodon. But it shows you how quickly that social media evolves. And platforms come and go. I'm old enough to be someone that was on MySpace. That's how I used to flirt with my now wife. I used to send her MySpace messages, but things have changed and platforms are always going to change. But the truth is that there's always going to be 3 different types of ways you're going to be posting on social media. It's always going to be text, some form of text, whether it's longer form text like blogs or shorter form text like Twitter. It's always going to be some visual, whether it's video, whether it's photo, and it's always going to be audio. So no matter what sort of platform is going to come and go, it's going to be one of these 3 things. So as long as one of those 3 things are focused on, you will find a home there. But look, we're going to have now a discussion with 2 of my colleagues here, and we're going to have a bit of a chat and a bit of a panel discussion about social media. So come on stage, and I'll introduce you. So let's give them a hand as they come on stage. Please take a seat. So next to me, we have Athanasia Mowinckel, or Mo.
Yes.
And she is a cognitive neuroscience and research software engineer or staff scientist and does some fantastic work, particularly with her work with R packages. I use one of your R packages. I'm a big fan of ggseg. It's fantastic, and a lot of people have gotten value for that. And also does a lot of work with R ladies. Can you tell us a little bit about R ladies?
Yeah, sure. It's quite timely, actually. I just last month, I became one of the leadership team of Our Ladies globally. So Our Ladies is a fairly large global non-profit organization that works at trying to improve the gender balance in R, specifically not just use of R, but specifically in software production in R. So most of the developers of R packages are men. The whole core development team of R, they're all middle-aged white men, unsurprisingly. And so we work through fully volunteer, chapter-based mainly meetups. So people meet, they talk about how they use R, and it's a way to have a space for minority genders to meet and talk about something that is often kind of a space that is often very dominated by men and can sometimes feel quite hostile towards women or gender non-conforming persons. So we work globally in trying to create more equity and inequality within the developing community of R, and it's working really well. We have, I think, last time we checked, we had over 180 chapters in over 30 countries. So it's fairly large. And yeah, it's very exciting to see what's happening. I mean, some of our chapters, it's literally just like 4 women meeting once a month and talking about like how they do things in R. And then there's other chapters, like there's a chapter in Philadelphia, and they're like huge. There's so many people. So it's really like differing. And we even have a remote chapter for those who are in places where they might be the only one.
Yeah.
Like, I know that there's a woman in Tromsø, she quite often joins the remote chapter. So that's just like an online community kind of thing. So that, yeah, it's really nice.
And what's the role of social media been for operating Our Ladies or for working with Our Ladies?
It's been so important. I think probably like the main place we are able to advertise about chapter events, about global goings on, it's all been through Twitter. When I wanted to start Our Ladies Oslo, because suddenly I'd seen like, oh, there's a thing called Our Ladies. I need that. I so need that. I was like, I want to start Our Ladies Oslo. And I tweeted that, like, I want to start Our Ladies Oslo. Does anyone want to do it with me? And just like by complete happenstance, that same week, it was our studio conference in the US, and there were 3 Norwegian women who met there. They saw my tweet. And they were like, yeah, let's do this together. And these are now 3 close friends of mine. I
Bringing people together.
never met each other before. We started a chapter, and it's so great to establish a community here in Norway as well. And if it wasn't for Twitter, I never would have met these women. Like, they're data scientists for consultation companies. One works for VG, and like, very different from where I am.
Yeah.
Like, as a pure academic, I'd never actually had industry contacts before, and suddenly I had that, which has also been quite great.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay, next to us, next to Mo, we have Dani Beck, who is a postdoctoral researcher who's doing fantastic work looking at the role of lifestyle factors on how brain structure and mental health changes across the lifespan. Yep. It's kind of one of those postdocs that I'm thinking, if I had to do a postdoc again, that's the sort of thing that I'd do. Not that I'd want to do a postdoc again. But if I did, it'd be something like that. So, Dani, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you, how did you make it on social media? What was your first initial experiences with social media as an academic, as an early career academic especially?
As an early academic, I think I had it during my master's degree. And then after realizing that I was stressed, I just deleted it because I was spending too much time on there.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until I started my PhD that I thought, well, now I'd like to get it back and kind of blog, tweet my experience as a PhD student. And that kind of is what opened the doors. I started tweeting just about things I find frustrating or funny or unethical, or things that I was learning that I was like shocked by in my early academic career, like questionable research practices and peer hacking and like replication issues. And it started off that way, and I think like that's how I started connecting and meeting people initially.
And you mentioned some blogging. Mo, you do some blogging as well. I do a little blogging too. What do you see as the value of more this long form production of stuff like blogs versus the short form stuff that you see in Twitter and Mastodon? What's your experience been to either of you in terms of your blogging?
For me, I'm a bit lazy, so I would much rather use time on making a thread on Twitter and condensing information into key points and just get it out there instead of using time to write something valuable for everyone, I guess. But I did switch from, but it was also about like kind of respecting my own time a bit and feeling like blogging was a lot of free labor of collecting a lot of information online and then condensing it in a blog and disseminating it with people and not getting paid. So I stopped blogging the minute I discovered that you can actually do science writing and get paid for writing these pieces. And then, the Twitter thing would be a different, But I think maybe to answer your question, that the existence of short word count tweets has probably made people write blogs less, I guess.
Okay.
My impression, but I don't know if the data backs that up.
What about for you, Mo?
I think it really depends on what you're writing. So like, I mean, you mainly write like a lot of like opinion piece kind of things, which I don't do because I'm.
So you can say which I don't read.
No, I do read them.
Oh.
I just don't write them. Mainly because I'm always. Unfortunately, as a female, I'm always a little bit apprehensive of voicing certain opinions too loudly because I can't deal with people, some people. So in generally, I tend to prefer blogging, but that's mainly because I write my blog is mainly in tutorial form, which does not work very well in any social media context, I think. Like, so I write coding tutorials, so I need to show code, I need to show what the code outputs. And doing that in a social media format, that's just, this is not, number one, it's not convenient for me, so that would take me much more time to try to figure out. And number two, it would be less accessible for people, because most of it would have to be like screenshots, and then I'd have to make like huge captions so that people with accessibility issues would be able to read them. In a blog post, that just happens, right? It's text, so the accessibility is there because it's all text-based. So for me, blogging is extremely important to what I do, and I wish I had more time to do it, because I always enjoy it, and I use it very often as like, I have to say, like, my blog is probably like quite egocentric in the sense, like, I use my blog also to kind of remind myself of, oh, hey, I figure out this thing. Let's write it down. Someone else might have use for it, and that someone else is very likely future me. So that is also like, so, yeah, no, and for me, like, social media is more in the sense of networking rather than the blogging, which is portraying like a specific goal. Yeah. What sort of networking benefits have you got? Is that more the Our Ladies work that you're thinking of, or other things? No, I mean, if we're talking about like how we even started on Twitter, so I think I made my Twitter in 2009, and then it lay there dead. Like not a single tweet, not even a profile picture. Like it was like it's the egg. It just existed. Yeah, because it was a format that I wasn't comfortable with. Like I'm. As you can probably tell, I'm a long-winded person, so writing shortly is a struggle for me. And I didn't kind of capture the essence of what Twitter was and what it could do for me. But in 2012, as a PhD candidate, I went to one of the biggest conferences in neuroscience, Society for Neuroscience, in Chicago. And this conference is so huge. We're talking about 10,000 people. I went there alone, no network, and I thought, what am I supposed to? I mean, I went to the talks and they were great, but I was alone. I literally had very little opportunity to just approach someone and go, hi. And then I noticed that there was a lot of hashtags like on screens and whatever. I was like, okay, so people are tweeting quite a lot here. Let me like go online. And I noticed that there's a lot of tweeting going on. So I started live tweeting every talk I went to, like what the take-home messages was, what I thought was interesting and whatever. And suddenly like my Twitter like follower account rose from like 5 people, which was like, I don't know, my brother, my mother, and like my closest friends, to like in the 200-300s in like a couple of days. Just from live tweeting? Just from live tweeting. And that's where people are like, hey, well, like there's this social gathering over here, you should join us. And like suddenly I felt like I had like an in. I was like, oh yeah, I'm that person tweeting. And they're like, oh, that's you, okay, cool. So that for me suddenly gave me a network, and I worked with some of them for, well, a couple of papers that never went anywhere, but it was fun. It was fun. I got a network from them. And they all are now like associate professors in different places, so that's been really beneficial. Yeah. Let's talk about the recent changes in Twitter. There's been there's a new owner. Things have been different over the last couple of months, and a lot of academics have been moving across to Mastodon as well. I have a Mastodon account. I know the two of you also have Mastodon accounts as well. But staying on Twitter for a bit, how have you found that Twitter has changed over the last couple of months? Or have you found that Twitter's changed over the last couple of months?
Should I?
Go for it.
I mean, I think with the exodus, it's kind of been a bit more quiet.
Okay.
I don't know. It feels like when there's like a protest and looting and people throw chairs into shop windows, and then there's a lot of noise, but otherwise there's less people on the street. Yeah. So I feel like the engagement has gone down. It could just be my account personally, but I feel like the engagement has gone down, and a lot of people that did go on Mastodon and probably reduce their Twitter time.
Yeah.
I'm seeing like less academic conversations and more general on my timeline, but it could be also changes with the with the servers.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I've had the same experience in that there seems to be less conversations there, and the sort of engagement that I get with posts has completely gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
And I can't figure out. I'm like, am I posting differently? I don't think I'm posting differently. Or is it the algorithm? It's so hard to know. But it has, at least for me, it has been quite a big change. And at least I find if I post the same sort of things on Mastodon, even though my audience is a lot smaller, I still get the same sort of level of engagement as I get on Twitter.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. It's almost kind of sad in the sense because, at least for me, I don't know, it's been the experience for the both of you, Twitter's been great for me. And I'm sort of really fortunate that it came along when I was kind of at the stage of my career that it was at. And now that there are other junior academics coming through, it's kind of sad that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Or at least the Twitter that I know, old Twitter, isn't quite there again. And I sort of really want Mastodon to do that same sort of thing. And I think it has potential, but it's not sort of quite there. What do you think, Mo?
I think there's a lot I can say about this. So there's I think part of this, I also see the silence. It's very much there. The engagement is very much lacking, and that is, I think, because all three of us have a social network there that very, very clearly responded in the negative to all the changes the new owner was implementing. Right, it was quite a clear community backlash. Like we don't want the Nazis back. We don't want we don't want these people coming back. They were spewing all sorts of hate, and we're not going to stand for it. So we moved, and getting the knack of Mastodon. Mastodon is, I think we need to be careful in thinking that Mastodon is a Twitter replacement, because it existed before. It existed as a kind of an opposition to everything Twitter was doing. Like it exists within a framework where there are no algorithms by design. It is designed to be federated so that there are different servers. You're allowed to say different things, or they can block other servers that are saying things that they don't, that they find hateful or whatever. Like, there's a very difference there. And I saw people in my network were already leaving Twitter before Elon took over, because they found the general atmosphere on Mastodon better. And in particularly, I'm thinking about people in persons that I know that are in very that are in social groups that are very often attacked, like trans persons, where the algorithm was basically always spamming them with trans content being positive or negative, and very often negative, because that is what the algorithm knows is going to create more engagement, right? So even though these people were not on Twitter as trans people to engage in trans activism, they were there to do academic or whatever stuff, the algorithm just kept spamming them. And they were having more of it, and that doesn't happen on Mastodon. So I think it's like important to, there are pros and cons here. Like the Twitter algorithm is there for a reason, because it does create more engagement, but is that engagement always for the better? While the Mastodon one, because you don't have the algorithm, the engagement is more linear. It can be a bit more tricky to kind of understand how this works. Because it doesn't easily give you the content that it knows you're interested in, basically. So it's, but I, in general, like the Mastodon experience, but I also never reached the levels of, of followers or engagement that you two had to begin with. So for me, I think like 90% of my former Twitter network has moved to Mastodon, and I have been able to find them again. So like, I feel fairly like I found my space, I found my people on Mastodon, but that is harder on Mastodon than it was on Twitter. So there is I think in general we need to acknowledge the fact that the social media platforms, they all cater to kind of different audiences, right? We were vaguely talking about it before we started. Like, not every country has Twitter as like their main academic outlet. Like other places, it's WhatsApp, some of them like TikTok or Instagram. Like, there are other platforms that are more important, or like in China where Facebook doesn't even exist, they have their own kind of type. So it really depends also about what the community in the country you are. Where are they?
Yeah.
So you can engage with those people, basically.
That's a really good point. I often hear conversations. ResearchGate is a social media platform, and quite often, quite often, a lot of academics, at least here within Norway and in the global north, are like, oh, I don't deal with ResearchGate. But a lot of other academics in the global south, that is their main way of actually communicating with other academics and also finding other work. So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about where your audience is. I mean, for me, I don't learn stuff by YouTube videos. I learn stuff via blogs. That's how I do stuff. But then other people love using YouTube, and then I realize that if I want to get my work out there, I need to go where my audience is at. So by actually doing stuff on YouTube, the sort of reach that I'm getting for my stuff is way more than with blogs. So it's about recognizing that sort of where your audience is at.
And I think in particularly, there's a quite distinct difference between what the global north and what the global south uses. And we see that especially in Our Ladies, like people keep saying, is it okay if we make an account on this social media platform? We're like, yeah, sure, just go ahead, use it where you're reaching people. Like, that is where you can reach your community, that's where you need to have a presence. If it's not Twitter, then don't have a Twitter account. Other people, like in the Our Ladies network, who are not academics, because let's face it, most of the world is not.
Really?
They're very like, why don't we have a LinkedIn profile? Like, I have a LinkedIn profile. I used it for the last 6 months of my PhD when I realized I'm going to be unemployed soon. And academia is not like necessarily the place I will end up, who knows? So I made one there, but oh my God, I can't deal with it. So I was very happy to find an academic job, and then it's still there, but I just don't use it. It's extremely important for industry, like all industries. Like, my mom was like, how come you don't have it? I was like, well, yeah. Like, okay, sure, Mom, you're like in the whole industry thing, but I'm not, so I don't even know how to deal with it. So it really is about recognizing where your engagement is going to reach.
Yeah. Dani, I'm sure you have a lot of people like asking you questions about social media stuff, considering the work that you've done. What do you think are some of the most common misunderstandings that academics who want to get involved in social media have when you chat with them?
I think most of them are quite hesitant, mainly because they've heard the negative sides of how many people like to argue and debate and comment, maybe harass. But as well as that, I think there's this fear that, and it's completely rational, you know, many have it, that if you write something, it's kind of written in stone, and then people are going to be able to criticize you about it whenever later on. And if you publish or you've written something and you disseminate it, then people are going to be able to criticize your work. And then there's this fear, like, what if it's like a prominent person or professor and they'll slate my work? I think while half or a bit of that is common misunderstanding, I think is also based in truth, like it can happen. But for the most part, the experience is quite positive, especially if you cater your network or your echo chamber, if you like, to an academic social media experience. And if you start following accounts that are academic, or people that are in your field, or people that are interested in the same things, and you start writing about those things as well, then your network and your following and people that comment and share your work and write about it, they're generally going to be people that are interested in this kind of stuff. So for me, I've mainly had only positive experiences, and also I think people like overvalue or estimate like people's interest in your work. I assumed having a lot of followers would mean like, okay, my science is going to go through the roof. And it's just like, you write a GIF or you post a meme and it gets 5,000 likes.
Okay.
I post my paper. I do the most diligent job writing a thread, putting all the figures out, getting all the numbers right, proofreading 15 times, post it. It's like 13 likes, and and now the worst thing is Elon's put this like view
Oh my God, yeah.
engagement
Yes.
counter, so I can see that you've all seen my paper.
Press the button. Press the button.
Just like it. It took me a year just like the paper, but yeah. So I think we kind of overestimate people's interest in like academic side of things. It's only people that really are supportive of your work or people that are in the field that are going to look at that link and then read through whatever you've posted that's work related. Otherwise, you probably don't have much to fear.
Yeah.
And my experience is it's only positive because it's always a preprint that I posted first. And that's always where people engage or write like a critique or a comment or feedback. And then you have a chance to actually incorporate that into the paper or use it in a positive way. And if you disagree, then you disagree. So there's no harm done.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this idea, because that's another common question that I get when I do workshops is like, what if someone criticizes my paper? I'm like, man, you should be cheering that people are actually interested in your paper enough to actually, I mean, of course, if they're being a jerk about it, it's a different story, but if it's constructive feedback, I know for me, I would much rather get that at the preprint stage where I can actually change it rather than actually being so embarrassed that it's a published paper where it almost would lead to a retraction because I've made an error. I want to know about that error now. And if I can do that within that stage, of course, no one wants to hear publicly that you're wrong. But I personally, like, I welcome having that sort of feedback as well. Yeah, that's been, I've had a number of good experiences in that way, but of course there are also negative experiences. So for you, Dani, it seems like it's sort of like you're still on these networks, you keep coming back, that although there are some sort of negative aspects, which there's no point pretending that this toxicity isn't there, that the positivity kind of outweighs that. What about for you, Mo, like that sort of positivity versus negativity?
I think there are definitely subjects I stopped tweeting about that are close to my heart, but that I decided early on that I cannot deal with the response. It's too toxic and it attacks my person too much. That is very specific topics that I know are kind of, I know they're a spark for a lot of people. Like it will tick some people off. And that's unfortunate that that's the type of response I get. I mean, as you say, I don't mind being criticized. I also have never had a problem admitting that I have been wrong about something, because that's just part of the job. But sometimes it's been quite toxic, and it's been attacks on my person and attacks on my credentials as a researcher, which is quite unnice. But something I've learned from our community and the R Ladies community is that I shouldn't be ashamed of blocking people. So if someone is toxic to me, I just block them. Like you're not giving me an opinion about the topic. You have decided I'm an evil person or whatever, and that you should attack me. And then like if I met this person on the street, I would literally just walk away. So I will walk away from this conversation as well. And that's fine. But on Mastodon, I've not had that experience. But as I said, by the time that the whole Mastodon Twitter debacle happened, I'd found my community and had stopped. I don't experience these things anymore unless I come to like the aid of friends in more fragile situations than me. But then the attack is usually not on me, it's me trying to defend other people who shouldn't have to deal with crap. But in general, I don't feel that there's lots of issue in general. But there are a couple of things, and in that case, I just say block, block, block. They are not interested in a conversation.
Yeah.
It is one thing to be interested in having a conversation, but these people are not. So why engage them? They are trolls, and I don't see the value in feeding the monster, basically. It won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's just block, mute, or use all the tools available. I think it's good as well. A lot of people it's very interesting. The work that I do, generally speaking, is not controversial. Some small spots, but generally. But I speak to people who it's like, I do research on far right extremism, and it's been very interesting learning about the people doing stuff on these controversial topics have to take different approaches. And at least these people have used different tools like blogs without comments. So at least you can get your work out there, but with the comments turned off, you can't have nasty replies if they're there. You could also do posts on Twitter and have the replies turned off as well. So there are various ways if you are working within working within controversial topics that attract these sort of things. So social media is pretty casual, and that's kind of one thing I like about it. I find one little trick that I do is if I know another academic is active on social media, I don't email them. I go straight to their DMs because I know they're checking it, and I know they're going to get the chances of them getting back to me are much more higher on Twitter than with email. And I love it because the formality is completely stripped away. It's not like, dear professor, I hope you are well. I really enjoyed your paper 3 years ago. With Twitter, you get straight to the point, and that's one of the benefits of social media is it's casual. But how do you find mixing the need to have this sort of professional profile as academics working within academia versus this sort of the playfulness of social media? How do you sort of reconcile those two different things, Dani?
I think my personal experience is it's quite difficult actually. Like when I first started doing the whole tweeting for my PhD progress and sharing my thoughts, I had one of my tweets go viral, and I think 12 or 13,000 people came in that weren't academics, and it was just like, it was crazy, it was insane. And at that moment, I had this tweet results of a research paper every day challenge that I wanted to do for 100 days, and I was on like day 17.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Ah.
And this was like a thread, and there was like one like every other paper or something. And when all those extra people came in, of course that got more attention.
Yeah.
But people really wanted to hear about other things, and so I started suddenly becoming sassy and giving hot takes, and then like I felt like the follower count changed the way I was aiming my tweets and audience, and I think after a few months I wanted to try and change the platform because I felt like it was taken away from me without my consent in a way.
Yeah.
So I started tweeting science again, and in a way I wanted to be a bit more tactical by following people I knew from the field, researchers in the same country or in research groups that I've heard of, and then just posting more academic issues and trying to make them more accessible to people that don't understand, why a PhD candidate is tweeting about his experience. So I wanted to focus a lot about what science is like, what academia is like the issues globally, but also in every country that is different to Norway, and talk again about sexism and racism in the form of the academic realm.
Yeah.
And that changed this whole following from being just random 13,000 people to slowly being other students and academics and people that understood or related to the tweets. So I still struggle with this, when to be just like professional or post-academically and not. And I think now I'm at a comfortable stage where I'm just being myself because I don't want to be professional. Like I'm not at work, and I don't want to misrepresent scientists either.
Yeah.
Like I'm a person with a personality, so I still do some hot takes here and there. But yeah.
Can't get rid of the hot takes. What about for you, Mo?
I think it's fairly different. Like I haven't had this experience of anything I have done go viral. I think the most viral I ever went was when some years ago I did an R package advent calendar It is so
remember that.
niche. It is so extremely niche. But it catered to my community. Like every day I tweeted about a package I use in my almost everyday
idea.
work and a little bit of why I love it. And I think I got like 4 or 5 followers every day. And that's like, for me, that's huge. Like I went from like around 500 people to like 1,500 at the end of it. So that was like, pretty good. But they all came for my R stuff. And then at some point, like, I think I lost a couple of them again at some point when I started like, oh, do you all know I'm gay? Because I am. You should probably leave if that's not okay. And I did actually lose some people to that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, fair enough. I mean, yeah, fair enough. But I don't think I'm just who I am when I'm there, in good or bad. Sometimes, most of the times, it's me either asking other people for help or me saying something about some stupid thing I did coding and the mistake it did, and then other people chime along like, oh yeah, I know this one. And it's nice, it's a way of not feeling alone in the stupid things I do every day. And just, I think also part of it is because I do teach coding here and there, and also through my blog, I always try to engage in the form of I also do mistakes all the time, and my code very rarely does what I expect it to on the first try, and that is totally fine. Like you don't have to be an expert in doing these things, just like try some stuff, figure it out. And I think that's where I'm getting like most of my followers and most of my engagement is people that I've held workshop for, or they've seen my tutorial and they want new, and then also GGSAG, which is like probably the biggest R package I've made in terms of people using it. And I do get quite a lot of help requests actually on Twitter, in my DMs, and I keep having to like ask them to ask in a bit more formal setting, because I don't like giving people coding help in my Twitter DMs, because it becomes this like closed circuit, like only these people will ever see the solution of this problem.
Public.
Like I like having that public because other people are going to have the same problem. So, but I understand sometimes I do make some exceptions if I see that they're very, very junior and they're apprehensive about putting their problems publicly.
Makes sense.
But then I usually also ask, like, can I reformulate this and then post it as an anonymous question I got because I think this solution is good for someone else. So I don't find it particularly tricky to balance, but again, I don't have that same kind of sphere that you have. Like I'm very much connected to the R community, where like this sort of semi-sarcastic, punny kind of thing is well established, and we all kind of go along with it, being happy. So I don't feel the need to be like, now I have to be like professional more, or now I can be just my old funny self, and I'm not actually particularly funny, but I try. So yeah, I don't find it to be. I do try to be more polite. I do cuss quite a lot, and I try not to do that too much on social media. Not because I think there's anything wrong with it, but there are some people that take like enormous offense to it, and I just think it's best to just leave that as it is. I will only cuss if I'm really, really frustrated with something.
When you're very angry.
I'm very, very angry. Yeah.
I think you both made a great point in that you need to do stuff that's sustainable. In that if you're being another person, it might be fun for a little bit, but it's draining to sort of maintain that sort of persona of being someone else. So by being yourself as much as possible, it's more sustainable over the long run. Well, we're going to have some Q&A soon, but before we do that with the audience, before we do that, we're going to play a little game.
Oh God.
no.
This is called Overrated, Underrated, or Appropriately Rated. So I'm going to say some things, and we'll start with you, Dani, and you have to say whether it's overrated, underrated, or appropriately rated, and I might follow up on some of your responses.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. LinkedIn.
Oh, Appropriately rated.
Appropriately rated. Okay.
I think I said all three.
Yeah, I think you mean-
GIFs in posts. Using
Underrated.
GIFs. Underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So you think it should be done more?
Yeah.
Okay. Timing your posts, thinking about what time you actually post things.
Underrated,
Okay.
even though I don't do it as much.
Okay, so
Underrated.
you think it's important to actually post at a certain time of day?
I think it is, but especially based on your follow account or where they're from. Like if your main following, you live in Norway and they're in like the US, if you post when it's 4 a.m. there, you might not get any engagement. So it's those kind of tweaks, but maybe not otherwise.
Okay.
I'm going to shoot in on that one.
Please.
Do not post an opinion before you're going to bed.
Ah.
You will not sleep. Just don't do it.
Turn your notifications off. Podcasts.
I know you have a podcast down.
Yeah, don't worry about me.
Overrated.
Overrated. Okay. You think there are?
No, I'm just not a big podcast person. I think too many people start it with like this idea of self-importance of what they have to say, and
Yeah.
it kind of, I don't know, would maybe drown out other people. I think also like TikTok and whatever the Instagram have done to make everything like quick videos like TikTok.
Yeah.
It's kind of just popularized people that do podcasts that are very crazy, like Andrew Tate and other right-wing people, and it's kind of like that's what podcast is now. You don't, and Jordan Peterson and stuff, you don't get podcast with just rational opinions like, this is a question.
Except Dan's.
yeah.
Just that one. Yeah. But no, I get what you-
That's why I think overrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Creating and sharing memes.
Probably underrated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think memes are the best way to get people to laugh or relate to you. You can write any tweet using just words, and it won't be as relatable as just like a tweet with a meme that makes people recognize themselves in a situation, especially if it's funny. So, yeah.
Are you memeing more or less these days?
I'm memeing less. I used to meme quite a lot, but now much less, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like I have less opinions nowadays.
All the opinions are already out there.
I've just stopped thinking.
Okay. Mo,
All right.
Twitter threads.
Totally underrated.
Totally underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that hasn't changed in the past couple of months? You still think they've got as much value?
I mean, if you're anywhere on there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hashtags. Use of hashtags.
Also underrated, but they're also used extremely annoyingly. Oh God, that's a really hard one, actually.
I think
No,
more relevant on Mastodon.
More relevant on Mastodon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have sort of an established one, it can be very useful. So like Our Ladies, for instance, like that's not going to get confused with something else. Whereas other things like my research area, oxytocin, there's like, I think Billie Eilish did a song called Oxytocin.
Yes, she did.
Completely gone. I can't use that hashtag anymore. But
dear.
other stuff like Our Ladies is very much like, that's yours.
That's
Or
true.
that's the community's, that is.
Yeah.
What do you reckon about hashtags?
I think good. There's a few I used at the start when I was tweeting about my PhD experience. PhD chat was
That's a
really
good one.
engaging.
That's a nice
Yeah.
And academic chatter. But
Yeah.
then I started tagging accounts of people that I knew that have said like, oh, just tag me on this if you want it to get more engagement. If you're wondering about something like an R question, just tag the actual account that deals with just our relevant things, and they'll retweet it, and then they have a lot of followers that are just interested in this because that's that community, and that gets engagement more than a hashtag.
Yeah.
And I myself don't like click on hashtags to see who's writing about like oxytocin or whatever I'm interested in. I kind of just when I search it, I just like if I'm really interested, I search it and just look at what people are writing because it
Yeah.
shows up in bold as key. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think you mentioned a good example before, Mo, for conferences, the conference
Oh
hashtag.
yeah,
You
conference
can't-
hashtags.
If you're at the conference, especially if there's a lot of parallel things to find out what's going on, if you can't make the conference, you're kind of almost there when people are sharing stuff, so that's good.
True.
Okay, Instagram.
For academics,
Yeah.
completely overrated.
Overrated? Yeah, okay.
Like For my, like, I can't crack that code.
Okay.
Yeah.
YouTube.
Underrated.
Okay. Sharing your failures. I think you already even.
Yeah,
with this.
that's completely underrated. Like, everyone should cheer the failures. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're human, right? You should stop, like, I wish more, like, prominent researchers did. I mean, because it's hard as a junior. Like, I apparently don't give a crap about failing, but most juniors do care and should care, because it has to do about your employability as well. Like, so, like, admitting your failures and cheering them when you're a junior and you're looking for grants, you're looking for positions wherever, that can hurt you.
Yeah.
So I think it's extremely important that more senior researchers actually, like we were talking, what's it called, the dark CV?
Dark CV.
Yeah,
Yes.
like about like all the grants you applied to and you didn't get. Like, so the PIs I work for, they're known for getting huge grants, and many of them, but y'all don't know how many grants those people apply to.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many that we don't get. So it looks like we're successful, and we are, but that's also because we're just like sending out grant applications everywhere.
Yeah.
I think having something that highlights like when you're doing something, and your coding mistakes as well. Like, one of the worst like things I know that happens when one of the PhD candidates comes and asks me for help with the code is like, I'm so sorry about the code being. I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't like, your code is good as it is. Let's just fix your problem. Don't think about how it looks. Like, I'm not gonna be the coding police. I'm not gonna. Like, I'm just like.
Don't indent.
Yeah, like, I can give you some tips of how I think it could be organized better, but I'm not gonna arrest you in any of this. And I have this like standing agreement with the PhDs that do use R. It's like, if you've been like banging your head against the wall on a problem for more than 30 minutes and you haven't gotten anywhere, ask me. Like, you are wasting your time.
Yeah.
Apparently this problem is hard and you need help. So don't waste your time, come and ask for help and I will give you some pointers. Like, it's about, daring to say that, oh, I can't figure this out, or I did this mistake. And that should be normalized.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some time for some questions. If anyone has any questions to the panel or to myself, any questions while you're all thinking of any potential questions. Thoughts on TikTok?
I've downloaded it and deleted it, I think, 4 times.
Oh, really?
So I think that kind of helps show my thoughts. I think it's probably very good for reach, and if you're good at editing and filming and stuff, it's probably very creative. But as a person that doesn't use it to make videos and just watches, it's so like addictive and time consuming that it's dangerous. So I always end up deleting it just because I realized, it's 5 a.m. and I've watched 6 hours of TikToks. My phone is burning my hand.
Yeah. I had the
and I
exact
can't
same.
let go.
I had the exact same,
But,
not 4 times. I've only done it once.
Yeah.
So only once.
You'll get there.
But I had the same. Like, I haven't made any content, but I was like, suddenly it was like 2 a.m. and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, deleted. Just like, this is not.
The annoying thing is I've learned so much from it as well.
I know.
Like, I love cooking, and I keep seeing, like, the algorithm is so nice in that it watches it gives me what I want, and I keep learning how to make these amazing quick meals, and I like it for that. But then it also gives me like a lot of other things, like fight videos and twerking and dance moves, and I'm just like, no, I don't want that. But probably good for science. I don't know. I've not watched a single science video on TikTok.
I think if you have like field research type thing, it could be really cool.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people doing field research, people who work within museums, kind of explaining, here's something that we've found. Because I think there's been a lot of researchers who are just walking through the findings that they're doing that have gotten a massive following for this. I mean, of course, there's a lot of potential ethical and security issues with TikTok, which come up whenever this is discussed. But I think the amazing thing is it helps people it helps you find your audience. And no matter how niche your topic is, there's someone out there who's into that, and the algorithm will show them those videos.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've had the exact same experience. I'm like, I need to delete this app because I've been here for 3 hours flicking through videos, and this is so bad for my productivity. Be gone.
It does say something about that. It has found a thing that humans apparently just really want to
5-second
continue with.
videos.
That is like ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've kind of me and a fellow R lady in France. She's also a package developer. We've been toying lately about doing. So I was explaining to her about Norwegian slow TV. Over Christmas, because it was the ribben grad for grad thing. And she was like, okay, this is extremely fascinating. She's a vegetarian, so the ribbe part wasn't so interesting. But I told her about like the train video and the log burning thing. And she was like, this is fascinating. We should make like an R package development slow TV, just like a movie of you for 8 hours making an R package. This must be the most boring thing I've ever heard. But at the same time, I totally know people that would watch that.
You know I did that?
No, did you?
Yes.
I actually didn't know that.
I did that for a paper. I can't believe people watched it. But as an experiment,
How long?
I did that on Twitch. And I think it was about 8 hours in total of just me just coding and swearing and Googling and figuring out. And this only worked because it was a sole author paper.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get my PhD students to do this. But basically, I thought, what if I just try it? I'm doing it anyway. And
So funny.
people watched it. It was weird. And now it's a paper. And I can kind of say, here's the paper, but here is how that paper was actually made. And science isn't somebody wakes up and has a genius idea. Science is hitting your head up against the wall and trying to figure out solutions and a heck of a lot of Googling. So there was a lot of sort of coding and Googling, but it's there's a market for it. I would watch it.
I can't believe you would. You have so many things to do.
There definitely is
Slow-mo.
a market for.
Oh, God.
There is a difference there is a market for this kind of stuff. But okay, we're coming up near the end. If there's no questions, we are going to wrap up then. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone who was on the live stream as well, and also thank you to the Science Library for organising this discussion around this new book. So hopefully I'll see you all on social media online. But please get in touch with myself and with Dani and Mo. So let's give Dani and Mo a hand. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.